This is attorney Howard Eichen, and today we're going to our legal information studio where we'll have Sarah Evans discuss overtime, when employers have to pay you overtime, and what you can do if you don't receive the proper amount of overtime. We're here to talk with Sarah Evans, and Miss Evans is an attorney in the firm of Io and Eichen, and Miss Evans concentrates on wage and hour law and also family law. And good morning.
Good morning.
And today we're going to talk about overtime issues, and in particular, when exactly should someone be paid overtime? Because I understand there are some issues or problems with that in general. Are there actual problems?
Yes, there are.
What kind of problems do you see?
Well, in a lot of cases, people are not compensated properly for their overtime. You're supposed to get paid 1.5 hours additional for every standard leave over the 40-hour work week you work.
All right, everyone knows that
Correct.
overtime. You should get OT when you work over 40 hours, right?
Correct.
All right, so why is that such a problem if that's such a simple concept?
Well, some people have been misclassified, and if you're classified as a salary employee, you don't get compensated for overtime. But a lot of those employees are really not salary based. They really should be hourly based, and that's where the whole overtime issue comes up a lot in legal practice.
Now, why would that be a problem? If an employer says you're on salary, aren't you on salary?
No, there's a whole test which you probably would need to consult an attorney to go over, but
And that would be you,
that
right?
would be me. But there's a whole test you can do to see if you really are a salary based employee, because most of these, especially independent contractors, that issue comes up a lot too. That they're saying that they really are either salary based or independently paid, but they really are an employee of that company.
Okay. So what you're saying is if your employer says you're on salary, you're saying you're not necessarily on salary?
Correct.
And does that happen a lot?
Yes, actually, the Department of Labor has even come up with an app that people can use for free to calculate their time just to make sure they're getting paid for every hour. People also don't get compensated when they work from home. Sometimes your boss will send you an email. That's considered time. You should be calculating that and trying to get paid for it.
Now, wait a minute. I look at an email every now and then, and I've been in all kinds of different positions in my lifetime, and I don't think I've ever been paid on the weekend or evenings for just looking at an email, but realistically, it only takes me 10 seconds to look at an email. Are you saying there's rules covering that?
Yes, there are rules specifically governing that.
What kind of rules?
Well, the Federal Labor Standards Act goes over all of that. And
What is that again?
the Federal Labor Standard Act
Okay.
it covers everything regarding these type of disputes. And if you're not being compensated correctly, it might only be 10 minutes on the weekend, but if you add that up every weekend, that's a substantial amount of time.
So let me take this to the furthest extreme. And let's say it applies to me. And I've worked in positions before, like I said, where I've checked an email. Let's say Tuesday night rolls around and I'm supposed to check if I have an email, and I look and I have one email from work, and it's something I take 10 seconds to read, and then I read it, I close my computer, and I'm done for the night. How is that handled?
You would want to first probably talk to an attorney, because a lot of times what we'll do is just write a letter for you and demand money from your employer, because
Well, wait a minute. 10 seconds of money, that hardly seems worth it.
I mean, there are also, for every violation, a certain amount of money that you can also put on top of that. The first easier route would be talking to your boss and, saying, when you're having me work on the weekend, I'm actually supposed to be compensated for this time. And if that doesn't work, maybe tell them, I'm kind of tracking it now. And I would suggest using something like the app I mentioned earlier and track all the extra time that they're asking you to put in. And if you see a certain amount build up, then it's probably worth it for you to look into trying to get some of that money back from your employer.
All right. So, and I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a troublemaker. So let me take this to the extreme. I check for 2 emails every single night. It takes me 10 seconds per email, but I have to do that every single night during the work week. So what should my employer be paying me for that?
How much time does it take you? I mean, 2 seconds, you're saying, or 10
Let's
seconds?
say 10 seconds, sure. 10 seconds max. I look at it, it registers in my mind. I make a little mental note to do something the next day at work, and I close my computer. Do they have to pay me for that?
They do have to pay you. I mean, but the amount of time that you're putting in there, if it's not even up to a minute, it's hard to even track. So that's why if it's 10 seconds, that's almost debatable. Are they requiring you to do this when you get home? If
Absolutely. I
it's a
have to do it as
requirement,
part of my job. Let's just say that as a hypothetical.
I would say more of the times where you have to actually respond to these emails where the time would really build up. Do you ever have to respond to any of these or
Sure,
just,
every now and then I spend 5 or 10 minutes on it. Does that mean I only get paid 5 or 10 minutes?
yes, you only get paid for the time you actually work.
Okay. So why would that be worth it for me to do?
It would be worth it for you overall for the additional compensation you get because there's if they are willfully after you telling them that you do have a problem with this, there's additional $1,000 penalty for any willful violation on top of the actual time.
And does that penalty come to me?
Yes, the penalty part does come to you.
So let's just say I get that $1,000 and I get paid for a minute here and 5 minutes there and 10 minutes there. How do I pay for my attorney?
Firms like the one I work at will take that on a contingency basis, which means we will take care of that part because the attorney fees will get paid by your employer.
Okay. Are a lot of people not paid for their overtime, do you think?
I've heard, well, actually, I've seen statistics wise, there's a 77% increase in these wage and hour disputes since 2004.
So why do some of these workplaces do this if they know it's illegal and they really should be paying people? Why do it at all?
Sometimes they just don't think anyone's ever going to do anything about it. It just depends on the employer.
Well, I have to say, if I were working somewhere, I'd be afraid to make some trouble and ask them to pay me overtime for some time I'm spending. Are there any protections or can they
Yes.
just retaliate against me?
No, there are definitely different protections against you too. There's wrongful termination suits you can file against them for that type of action if they did let you go right after you did bring up a lawsuit.
Okay. And the fact that I do that, if I were to do it, does that make me unemployable?
No.
What is that spread around different employers or is it in the newspaper or anything like that?
I mean, if you put it in the newspaper, if you go out and reach out to media, then yes. But on its own, most of these lawsuits don't hit the front page unless they're class action lawsuits.
I'm not that crazy about going to court for really minor things. So, do people always need to go to court on something like
No,
that?
majority of these lawsuits are settled outside of court, so you would never see a courtroom.
And what do you mean settled? What's the process on that?
Well, the employers know they've done something wrong, or they just don't want to spend the expenses for an attorney. So they will make a settlement offer to you, generally in these cases, and that's how most are resolved.
And let's just say I'm a $10 an hour employee and my employer didn't pay me 100 hours over the last year. How much do I get?
We would have to look at the different if it was willful and see if there's any additional penalties. But you'll get the total amount that you're seeking plus additional penalties if it is willful, and then on top of that, the salary part. I mean, the hour part will be calculated the actual time that you've missed out on. But we would first make an offer over to the other side, and sometimes there's negotiations that go on. So it would just depend on the whole circumstances of your case.
All right, now I remember in my past that sort of thing happened, and I'm sure that pretty much includes everyone else all over the world. They have past employers where that has happened. Are they out of luck if they're not working somewhere anymore?
Do you mean the statute limitation issue
Well,
or
yeah, well, let's say I quit a place and it was 6 months ago. Am I out of luck getting what
n-
they owe me?
no? There's a 2-year statute limitation,
Okay.
and 3-year if it was willful.
So what does that mean? Can I go back a certain ways?
Yes, you can go back 2 years.
Okay. And where do you do your wage and hour work out of right now?
All of Florida.
Okay.
It's a federal, you'll be filing federal court. So the Middle District Court is where I file most of the suits, but
Okay.
anywhere in Florida.
And if someone contacts you, do they have to write a check to you? Because let's face it, people who were underpaid don't have a lot of money to hire an attorney.
No, I would represent them for free. I would get all my fees from their employer.
Okay. And is this something that's fairly successful a lot of times?
Yes, very high success rate in these cases. And you will not have to pay anything. They've never done attorney's fees because some cases you're required to pay attorney's fees if you don't win. But it's as long as you have a legitimate claim, you never have to pay the attorney's fees.
So I'm not in danger at all to attorney fees if I file a lawsuit.
Correct.
And let me just clarify this, and this is on behalf of all the people who might see you. They don't have to pay anything when they hire you?
No, all my fees would come from their former employer.
Okay. And is this something that people should do when they haven't been paid overtime?
Absolutely. You deserve to get every dollar you've worked for.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. And we hope to see you in a later video about wage and hour law.
Thank you.
Thank you.